Hello, and welcome to ELLROY Reads. I'd like to start today's show by saying a big thank you to our new subscribers, our followers, our supporters. The show is growing, it's getting better all the time, we're getting new content out. So if you're new to the show, hit that subscribe button, hit like, comment, share, and it helps me to keep making these videos. Okay, so this week's episode of ELLROY Reads, we are looking at the work of Norway's favourite son, Jo Nesbo, and his novel, The Sun. And this is one of the Black Lizard vintage crime reprints that are very, very beautiful covers. And ELLROY wrote the introduction to all 7 of them. And Jo Nesbo is very rare breed in that he is a writer who went into writing almost by chance and just turned to be absolutely mega successful at it. And he's been pretty successful at everything he's done. So he was born in 1960. He was born in Oslo. He was educated at the Norwegian School of Economics. He had a successful career as an accountant and a stockbroker, as a footballer. He's an extreme sports enthusiast. He's always been in absolutely great shape. He's incredibly handsome and charming. And he was also in a highly successful rock band called De Deur, and they had a platinum album. And it was around the time that they were wrapping up that he tried his hand at writing. I witnessed him give a very extensive interview at Harrogate's Fixed of Peculiar Crime Writing Festival. He was interviewed by Mark Lawson on stage, and I'm giving you a lot of information for that interview because it was one of the best interviews I ever saw. The way he put it, he was at Sydney Airport on business, on a trip to Australia, and he just started writing. A story came to him related to a kind of mixture of detective story and Aboriginal myths and folklore, and it became published as The Bat, and it introduced him to the world to his detective character Harry Hula, who's now world famous. And he wrote it entirely for himself. He wasn't expecting it to get published. He thought, well, perhaps if it gets knocked back, I might get some interesting feedback about what was good about it, what was bad about it, what you need to be improved. In the end, he didn't get much feedback. They just accepted it, and Harry Hula became a publishing sensation. And he's gone on. He's written brilliant standalone novels like Headhunters. There have been film adaptations. He's written a highly successful children's book. He's the most successful Norwegian author of all time. Now, The Sun is a standalone novel, and the titular son is a guy called Sonny Luftist, a relatively young guy who spent almost his entire life in prison, confessing to a series crimes that he did not commit. He's a drug addict. He's paid off in heroin that is smuggled into the prison for him. His father committed suicide, and over the shame over the crimes he committed, or did he? And the father-son dynamic is absolutely crucial here, and it's very important to Nesbo himself. So Sonny Luftist has this kind of guru-like confessor-type role in the prison. Everybody seems to want a kind of absolution from him. But when he realizes that, when information is fed to him that reveals like he's been played for a fool all of these years about his father, he breaks out of this high security prison. He has this ingenious escape, and he sets about righting the wrongs. He's going to expose the real criminals in Oslo. Now, at first, the warden of the prison's like, this guy's spent his entire life in prison. He's got no relatives on the outside. We're going to catch him straight away. He's got no money, hasn't got a change of clothes. As far as we know, he's got nowhere to go. He doesn't know about internet society and how to get by there. And the police are similarly optimistic. We have Simon Kafas, who's the aging detective who's out to look after him, and he's got a kind of interesting backstory in himself. Like, he's been a bit of a gambling addict. His marriage is under strain. So really, it's a freeway chase because you have Sonny, who's trying to spend as much time outside as he can to reveal this kind of increasingly elaborate conspiracy. You have the police who are chasing him, and you have the kind of organized crime network, which is this kind of shadowy, spectre-like organization. And by the way, Nesbo isn't always one for realism. The books are over the top, but that's part of their fun. Who want him silenced? They want him dead, because they don't want all of this coming out. And many members of this criminal network are actually high functionaries in government, in business, in the cream, so to speak, of Norwegian society. Now, James Ellroy is a fan of Jo Nesbo and has often spoken about his love of the Harry Hole detective novels. He says they're over the top, and it's rare that James likes something over the top. He usually goes kind of for realism, although James's novels are kind of over the top in their own way, but like in a similar way, it's like they have to be over the top, but you've got to believe them as they're happening. I.e., what Nesbo does and what Ellroy does is they create this world, and even though parts of it are kind of fanciful, you buy into it, so you believe it. So they follow their own logic, and they're not going to break through on that. In fact, Ellroy compares Nesbo here to Mickey Spillane, who was another writer Ellroy admired. Again, ridiculously over the top, Mickey Spillane, particularly when read today. But when Mickey Spillane burst onto the scene in the 50s, and he was the Jo Nesbo of his day, he was the most successful author, still one of the most successful authors in sales of all time. You believed Mike Hammer's world. And there was an interview where Jo Nesbo interviewed Ellroy on stage. I remember watching it around the time I was doing the Ellroy biography, and it was actually very, very difficult to watch, because Ellroy, I believe, it's fairly obvious actually, was going for a relapse. His behavior was very, very strange in the interview. He didn't seem himself, and it was a very, very difficult interview to watch. When I was revising this episode, I went to watch it again, just as research, and I couldn't find it. I assume it's been taken down for the right reasons. But Ellroy's come out of his relapses. He's sober again, and I just want to go back to the time I saw Jo Nesbo at Harrogate. He went into his family history in a way that I don't think he's ever done in any other interview, and it's certainly not maybe on his Wikipedia page or on his author website page. His mother's family had fought with the resistance during the Second World War, and as a boy he'd idolized his father. But then it came out when he was about 15. He discovered that his father had fought in the volunteer units that volunteered for the Germans and fought on the Eastern Front. And he's absolutely shocked by this, because he'd brought up, he says, Norway is a young country, and the image I had of the Nazis as children with the black uniforms, the Hugo Boss SS uniforms, and the menacing steel cat helmet. Now he had to somehow process that his father had been one of them, or he'd fought with them. But he said his father was very kind and said to him, you can ask me anything. So he did. He said it came out his father had spent time in the US as a young man and become this very, very fervent anti-communist. So when Norway was occupied, he saw it as his opportunity to fight the Soviet Union. And, I'm sure he got disillusioned by the whole thing, but he fought at the siege of Leningrad. He told Jo Nesbo one story about how he'd been asleep in a trench, and a Russian soldier had snuck into this trench and killed every German soldier in it. And, he'd woken up and found everyone else dead. That maybe the Russian soldier thought he was dead or something like that. So he was very, very lucky to survive. Then after the war, as a collaborator, he'd served 2 years in a Norwegian prison. But he'd said himself he felt like he got off lightly. And, Jo Nesbo was very, very kind of cynical about patriotic culture. I don't know if that's a left liberal thing, that you get kind of liberals in every country. They don't like patriotism. But he spoke very kind of negatively about Norway creating this image of it being, resistant to Nazism. He said it was the dream posting for a German soldier in World War II because it was the cushiest place they got to live. And he said the levels of collaboration were high, but hey, the levels of resistance were high as well. And at one point, I believe there was something like one German soldier for every 6 Norwegians. And Hitler never, despite pleading from his generals when Germany was losing the war, he never actually agreed to sign off on the German army, kind of either massively reducing its presence in Norway to fight elsewhere. There were fanatical Nazis, including the Reichskommissar of Norway, who thought that Norway would be the last stand of the Nazis, and that's why the troop movement was, so kind of heavily concentrated in Norway. They thought it would be Fortress North. Anyway, that never happened. Thankfully, the Nazis were defeated. Germany was exhausted. There was no more. There was no more desire for further war in 1945. And no, Jo Nesbo talked about this. It was an absolutely fascinating interview. This was 2012 when I saw him in Harrogate. It was shortly after the Oslo bombings and the island attacks by Anders Breivik. And he said he was actually in the gym. He was up a rope doing climbing when he felt the explosions, and he was shocked and horrified by it. Harry Hula, I heard the pronunciation from him as well. That's how it's pronounced in Norway. I'd always pronounced it as Harry Hole, but it turns out that he wanted a Norwegian detective it was easy to anglicize, and very smart guy with his accountancy and his economic background. He's really turned writing novels into a sensation, into a very lucrative business. And The Sun, as a standalone novel, it is up there with his best of the Harry Hula and Headhunters, which is my favorite standalone novel. And buy this wonderful, wonderful edition. Jo Nesbo actually said that it was his father's ambition. The year he retired, he planned to write his memoirs, or he was going to write it as a novel on the Eastern Front in the German army. But then sadly he got ill and he died the year he retired. But as we now know, it was the son who became the writer. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next time for another episode of ELLROY Reads. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.